When I think of Souls-likes, the first word that comes to mind is gimmicky, and that notion has been apparent time and time again within a variety of Souls-like games, such as Souls with Guns, Souls with Anime Girls, and many other games featured on Iron Pineapple's Steam Dumpster Diving series. It wasn't until recently that gimmicky Souls-likes had begun developing further beyond than just the gimmick, and in the process, created unique personalities for themselves, bringing fresh ideas to the table. Lies of P on face value is Pinocchio Souls, yet introduced an ingenious weapons system and reframed the world of Pinocchio within a rich, deep world with mature themes. Remnant on face value is Gun Souls, yet is pretty good from what I hear. I haven't played that one yet. And Lords of the Fallen on face value is Lamp Souls, yet brought fresh ideas to the table such as boredom and pressing copy-paste 50,000 times on 4 boss designs and then pretending like your game has content. When I first saw Another Crab's Treasure on TikTok 2 years ago with the content creator talking about their Crab Souls game made by a small indie studio, I assumed it would simply be another title attempting to take advantage of FromSoft's clout without having a deep understanding of why their games work in the first place. As it turns out, I couldn't have been more wrong. If I had to describe Another Crab's Treasure in one word, that word would be charming. The character design is incredible, making every boss drip with personality, often giving you a basic idea of the character of these enemies without them even saying a single word. The meshing together of a cutesy world and the pessimistic dark theme involving the pollution of the ocean gives this game a classic Souls vibe while still indulging in the silly cartoonish elements. And the various references and gameplay elements inspired by Souls, as well as being surprisingly framed within a Banjo-Kazooie style of gameplay loop, leaves you with the impression that the devs have a deep appreciation for these games. It seems very much like a game made by people who love video games for people who love video games. And so, let's jump right into this charming, charismatic little indie game, which I'll be covering the whole campaign of, showing off most of the cutscenes. So, spoiler alert. It begins with a documentary-style framing.
What word comes to mind when you think of the Earth? For some, that word might be beautiful. Others might say the world is hateful, or evil, or unstable, or full of shit. But above all else, the word that best describes our world is resilient. Against the odds, time and time again, creatures adapt to make the most of their given environment. Some learn to feed on others, stealing their vitality for their own. Some become scavengers, living off what strangers leave behind. And others still, as we will soon see, would prefer to be simply left alone.
Sir, please open up.
Oh, you're not a bird.
Sir, are you the owner of this residence?
You mean my shell? Yeah, it's mine. Do you like it?
I represent the Royal Duchy of Slacktide, which has recently annexed the territory surrounding and including this tide pool. I'm here to inform you that you have outstanding taxes that date back an upwards of 10 tides. If you are presently unable to pay this balance, the Duchy will claim you home until you...
Hold on. I've got some questions. First of all, what's a duchy? Also, taxes?
Okay, so basically, the Duchess of Slacktide owns this whole area now. And she puts a lot of effort into keeping it safe. So, everyone who benefits from that has to abide by her rules and pay up once per tide.
There's still plenty of birds here. I don't know if it's really safe.
Look, kid, I don't have time to argue political nuances here. I've got a lot of tax evaders to get through. You gotta pay up right now, or I'm gonna have to repo your property. Got it?
Okay. I think I've got a hard kelp or two around here somewhere.
The first thing that surprised me was the inclusion of voice acting, which is a neat touch that a lot of modern AAA games can't even do, such as the last Pokemon. Krill is asked to pay his taxes, which he attempts to do by offering Heart Kelp, this game's Estus Flask, before being turned down and introduced to one of the main themes of the game. The currency of this game is trash, or more specifically, the souls of this game are microplastics, which is such a morbidly funny choice. The shark mentions you can obtain microplastics to pay your taxes with by obtaining bread clips, which is the golden rune mechanic of Another Crab's Treasure. They're all pieces of garbage framed as different claws, ranging from bread clips to jumper cables. This dialogue also introduces you to the perilous attack mechanic from Sekiro, which I didn't notice until later. The red symbol above Krill's head means that the boss will be performing a grab attack, which the shark then does, yoinking Krill's shell in the process. There's also a blue symbol, which means the boss will be using a crushing move that can't be blocked and requires dodging. The one major complaint I have with the implementation of this feature is that the symbol appears above Krill's head instead of the boss's, which generally has my full attention. I often found myself missing the prompt while focusing on the boss, or being unable to properly see it due to camera issues. Maybe this could be a quick fix with a patch, but I do think the system would work better if the alert was positioned above the boss, such as in Sekiro. The shark dips with your shell and you chase him to the edge of the tide pools, at which point you'll confront him and he'll tell you to get a job and pay your taxes. And I've never seen a more evil antagonist before. Krill mentions that he doesn't want to talk to people and would rather be left alone, but with his shell on the line, he plunges himself into the ocean. A short ways further and you'll come to the realization that this game, again, like Banjo-Kazooie, is very much a platformer. This aspect of the game is fully fleshed out and realized within large sections of the game later on, however, is pretty rough around the edges at times, especially when Krill has to overcome steps or small bumps in the architecture, which he will often collide with and be completely stopped. There's also many points where boardwalk-style level design will have subtle gaps between boards that you can fall through, which doesn't seem all that intended and is often frustrating. After that, Krill will come across another crab that he'll attempt to talk to, but will become hostile along with several others, and with no weapon, you're forced to flee. And upon escaping the enemies, you'll stumble upon the game's only weapon, a rusty fork. With fork in hand, you're able to perform basic and charged heavy attacks, as well as jump attacks, which are most useful as means of propelling yourself a bit further while platforming. Speaking of which, while platforming across this area, you'll come across the first of these umami crystals, which reward you with a currency similar to Banjo-Kazooie's musical notes. And upon reaching the nearby bonfire, which are moon snail shells, you'll be able to look at the warpable bonfires to see how many total umami crystals are in the area and how many you've collected so far. Collecting all of them will involve defeating many purple-eyed enemies, which will drop umami upon their defeat, which will happen similarly and in greater quantities upon beating bosses. You'll eventually find vendors to spend these crystals at, but for now you can collect them to scratch that OCD itch. After overcoming the tutorial area, you'll emerge into the Shallows, the first exploratory area of the game. The first character you'll meet is this snail who's racist against hermit crabs. He'll tell you where to find the Duchess's castle before turning hostile against you. After beating his ass, you can continue along the scenic plastic shard-littered pathway dotted with cigarette butts along the sides. Explore the area a little further and you'll come across the first boss available to you, and one that seems to be a noob crusher similar to the Erdtree Sentinel. The Royal Shell Splitter has such a cool design, wearing an executioner-style black mask and wielding a U-lock affixed with a razor blade, making it look like a guillotine. This fight was the first time I was introduced to the capsizing mechanic, where after filling an enemy's posture bar and hitting them with a charged heavy or special attack, you knock them to the ground for an uninterrupted opening. With further upgrades later on, you can unlock a critical attack after capsizing an enemy. However, I developed a charged heavy build by the end of the game that yielded insane damage, and I frequently entered the critical animation instead of charging my heavy, which by comparison dealt unimpressive damage, and I ended up wishing that I wouldn't have unlocked it. Shell Splitter is also the first enemy you'll see using a Frighten attack, applying a status effect that once full will force you into your shell, leaving you unable to attack. I didn't have a shell yet, so I wasn't sure how the mechanic worked at first. Now, one pretty cool feature about this game that seems to be getting a lot of play on TikTok is that some bosses will utilize an insta-kill grab move with brutal finishers, and Shell Splitter is the most early game example. If you fail his grab, he'll pinch you in his claws, place you into the lock, and release the razor, resulting in the screen instantly going black. This move seems to really resonate with people, and I would attribute it to the move's subtlety. There's no blood or gore, you simply get to experience exactly what Krill would experience in that moment, which is helplessly being lowered into the device, hearing a slice, and that's it. Fucking hardcore. I love it. Upon your death in most boss fights, you'll be given the option to spawn at a Stake of Marika, which is awesome. I love to see the innovations that Elden Ring developed to mitigate frustration utilized in other games. However, I will say that the jellyfish you spawn on can be kind of annoying at times. In some instances, you're respawning on a small platform which you're raised above and still need to gather your souls and shell, and this experience only highlights some of the more janky aspects of the platforming design. A quick patch to avoid this would be to spawn your souls on the jellyfish with you, or skip the whole process in jellyfish respawns, simply automatically giving you your souls and shell in those instances. Anyway, the shell splitter is a pretty cool early game challenge, albeit a bit simplistic. The most important thing I learned was to utilize the charged heavy after dodging a move, which can quickly throw you back into the fray and deals pretty good damage. As well as that, it will automatically trigger a capsize when the bar fills, which can otherwise fluster you when deciding in the heat of battle how or if you'll capsize the boss. The rest of this first area is mostly filled with content you'll not have access to without gaining access to further abilities. You can collect various items such as more bread clips, and also gain access to your first stowaway. The stowaways essentially act as rings, but offer a pretty interesting play on the concept. You're given 3 slots for stowaways, and you start with 3 capacity, which can be upgraded later, but is pretty expensive. Your slots, however, will always stay at 3, and this is because more powerful stowaways will take up more capacity. In the early game, this will leave you with the decision of either having 3 weak stowaways or only running 2, but one is more powerful. And later on in the mid and end game, you'll have to decide if you want to spend a large amount of microplastics necessary to upgrade your capacity, and weigh that against leveling up or purchasing shell insurance, or the $15,000 maid costume. In the endgame, there are incredibly powerful stowaways, such as the Shark's Tooth Plus, which takes up 4 capacity but offers 60% increase to charged heavy damage. And since I had mostly used charge attacks throughout my playthrough, I couldn't resist using it, which meant spending a huge amount of microplastics to max out my capacity as soon as possible. This also applies to many powerful umami-based stowaways, which buff things like shell spells, which I'll get into soon enough, but overall offers a lot to chew on in regards to your build. I think this system is really innovative, especially when compared to standard Souls-style rings, which you'll find once, equip, and then mostly forget about. The capacity system offers you valuable rewards almost entirely throughout your playthrough and interesting potential choices to make about your build. You'll eventually make it to the Duchess's castle, which is guarded by these 2... Are these lobsters or prawns? I don't know, I'm gonna be messing that up the whole game. The lobster tells you to put your crab dick away and put a shell on, which you'll be able to find nearby, given to you by the captain of the guard. You make your way there, but no such captain is found, so you help yourself to the vending machine, obtaining your first shell, an empty soda can. And then you'll be met with this absolutely goated character.
Claws off, lawbreaker!
Oh, Crab, I'm sorry. Was I supposed to grab a ticket?
You think yourself above the law, but the law is not so easily outwitted. By its strength alone do we rise above the beasts.
I'm really sorry. I'll go to the back of the line, okay?
You should be so lucky. I'll have your head like I have these other worthless law breakers.
He's so over the top and awesome, and I think his cadence might be a reference to Gyobu Mazutaka Oniwa from Sekiro. This fight is essentially the intended first boss fight, and has a pretty simple basic moveset that you'll see many times in the Cavalry Lobster enemies. His character design is again so cool, with Sunset Sarsaparilla star bottle caps as a badge and a slushy lid and straw as a lance. The devs have so many cool ideas in regards to how these crustaceans utilize the various bits of trash in recognizable ways. Whether it be a samurai crab unsheathing disposable chopsticks from their paper sheath, an isopod wearing a shoe as a business suit, or the bloodborne squid, complete with his head in the shape of a hunter's hat, as well as a party popper blunderbuss and an extendable trick weapon nutcracker. It's all so fucking cool. Anyway, Krill kills the guard and returns to the castle with his new shell, which allows him audience with the Duchess. She tells him that he can have his shell back if he can obtain a shiny object from a nearby cave, which he won't be able to get to without an upgrade found in the storage room. After traversing a jumping puzzle and knocking down this house of cards, you'll obtain some old fishing line, which will serve to be your Sekiro grapple hook. However, in many ways, this grapple is more versatile than in Sekiro. Being a platformer, you're given many opportunities to grapple onto fishing hooks and nets that litter the platforming sections. As well as that, you can upgrade the line, giving you the ability to expend barbed hook consumables to perform grab attacks, and when upgraded further, a dashing attack similar to Liza P's fully upgraded puppet strings. You can also fish up items, but I only noticed this much further into the game and only saw a couple instances. With your new abilities, you can proceed to the cave, which was one of the first few times I noticed this stuttering that happens when transitioning to another area. It can be pretty bad when loading large areas, but rarely affects the gameplay in any meaningful way. It's still pretty annoying when it happens. What, was this game made in Unity or something? Oh. By entering the cave, you'll be greeted by the Moon Snail, the creature whose shells make up your bonfires. He's astral projecting to you and talks by narrating your actions, and then hints at the umami abilities you can gain access to by reaching him, by awakening your latent umami powers. Afterwards, you'll have access to the mana necessary to utilize shell spells. The shell spells are intrinsic abilities that shells can utilize for various purposes, including healing effects, projectiles, melees, and various other helpful tools. One thing worth mentioning is that the shell mechanics in this game are borderline mandatory to experience this game in an appropriate way. This was a hard thing for me to come to terms with, considering I avoid playing with any type of shield in Souls games except for the utility of parrying. Shells are baked into the core concepts of the game, and embracing that will offer you a much less abrasive experience than attempting a naked run, which I'm sure is possible, but I can't imagine would be all that enjoyable. At the end of the cave, you'll find your progress halted by a boss fight with the polluted platoon Pathfinder, a crab wielding a glass bottle. This is a pretty simple fight that's meant to fully introduce you to crushing moves now that you've realized the potential of your shell. I was still being stubborn and decided not to wear one. At phase 2, he'll use a crushing move that will shatter his bottle, which then gives him access to a thrusting stab move combo. Fearing his combos, I used distance to bait out the moves from outside of their range and finished him pretty quickly with charged moves. Beating him will grant you the Pristine Pearl, the item the Duchess sent you to find, but will also unlock the final bit of the cave, which is the home of the Moon Snail. The Moon Snail will allow you to spend umami crystals you've gathered so far on a skill tree starting with the Shelliportation ability. That enables warp on bonfires. You're prompted to do this with dialogue, and after purchasing the upgrade, you're forced into more dialogue, closing the menu, which led me to foolishly believe that I could use the upgrades within my own Start Menu skill tree page. And after opening it to see the prerequisites were not met for the upgrade, I got distracted and assumed I couldn't get any upgrades yet. Yeah, I'm dumb. Whatever. Returning to the Shallows, you'll be met with a darker scene. The trash has gunked all of the crabs in the castle, causing them to frenzy, which is relayed to us when this lobster guard begins complaining about his life before attacking us. After making it through the gunked castle, you're reunited with the Duchess, in hopes of exchanging the pearl she wanted for your home.
I don't know if you noticed, but your guards are going nuts out there.
Oh, Clontre, little hermit. Our minds are clear as crystal now.
Oh, shuck.
I once thought my duchy quite beautiful, you know, worth preserving. But compared to the reefs, it's a shameful, transient thing, destined to wash away. That's why I'm having them tear it down. I thought my beauty worth preserving too. But of course, my worthless life will wash away as easily as any other. Almost as easily as yours, little hermit!
Magista is one of the weaker fights in the game, and similarly has one of the weaker character designs. I'm not sure what her weapon is supposed to be and if it has some greater significance than I realize, but otherwise her design is just a queen crab. The gunk puddles she leaves behind on all of her attacks are the main way the fight is shaken up beyond the standard crab fights we've seen so far. Although the arena has a new shell type in the form of this teacup, which when activated gives you an attack speed bonus, which is fitting for the theme of the fight. Her grab move might be cool, especially considering it looks as though she meant to capture you in the ball of her weapon, but I was never hit by it, so I'm not sure. Her phase 2 initiates a spinning combo, which might be a jumpable move. But honestly, I never found a situation where jumping over the enemy's attack was any more valuable than simply dodging it. And that seems like kind of a missed opportunity within a game such as this, where jumping is so frequently used in platforming sections and there are many jump-based upgrades. Upon defeating the Duchess, she'll spew a bunch more gunk out of her mouth, and it's like, was she just constantly eating this stuff? How much of it was in her? Beating her will grant you the Royal Wave adaptation, which is one that I frequently used by the end of the game. After fully upgrading it, it becomes a pretty powerful tool that hits hard and debuffs enemies for a few seconds, leaving them more vulnerable to damage. The shark will once again make an appearance, telling you he's going to head into a nearby city to pawn off your shell for some microplastics, leading you to your next location. Unfortunately for you, the bridge is out, much to the displeasure of this blue hermit crab. You'll find your way around through a pretty challenging section of platforming, which culminates in this large ramp that can be traversed by sprinting while blocking, while using a round shell. This rolling mechanic adds a small degree of utility to any round shell and can offer a unique way to get around if the terrain allows for it. Surpassing the broken bridge will bring you to New Carcinia, a hub area that will act as Firelink Shrine from this point forward. But Krill only has one thing on his mind at this point, and that's getting his shell back. He asks the town greeter, who will recommend 4 points of interest where your shell might have been sold. These are essential NPC vendors whose services you'll be utilizing throughout the rest of the game, and this bit of storytelling is a nice way to introduce you to them. Although I would note that the layout of this town kinda sucks as a hub area. The vendors are pretty far from each other, even to the point where there's an upper and lower area, which necessitates 2 bonfires for convenience's sake. Luckily, I didn't have to take all that many trips back here before finishing the game, so it wasn't all that grating, but I imagine it would have been had the game been longer. The first stop is Shellfish Desires, a vendor who you can buy unique shells from, but also insure the shells you've equipped before. Insuring a shell adds it to a list of shells within the bonfire menu, which you can choose to spawn with every time you die. I like this feature a lot, especially after I began fully embracing the shell gameplay. It's pretty expensive early on, so you'll want to think hard about which shells have the most value to you and in which situations you'll want to switch to a different insured shell. The next area I visited was the museum, which only serves to introduce you to this Scholar Crab character who will push the plot further very soon. Heading into the lower area, the next location is a blacksmith who can upgrade your fork, increasing its damage, but also giving it a new upgraded model. And finally, there's a vendor for stowaways, both buying and selling them, as well as upgrading your capacity. After investigating every location, Krill will express his frustrations before a cutscene plays as a new prawn shop opens up with a vendor wearing Krill's shell upon his head. This prawn mentions under his breath that we're still following him, and then tells us that he bought this shell fair and square from a very cool shark, implying that he was the one who took our shell from us in the first place. The conversation is cut short when the town bell rings, notifying the citizens of the incoming trash day.
Trash day! It's trash day! Everyone get your baskets! Don't miss out!
Back on! I saw it first! Get your own trash, suckers!
What is that thing?
I've never seen anything like it.
It's a message from the captain! It's got his face right on it! It's gotta be!
Excuse me? Excuse me, please. Pardon me. Excuse me, young lady. As New Carcinia's official historian, I'm sure I can shed some light on... My God! If I'm not mistaken, this is part of a map! A map showing the way to a most valuable treasure, I say! If someone were to find its missing pieces and decipher them, why, they'd be rich beyond their wildest dreams, I say!
Rich? I like the sound of that. That treasure's as good as mine. I'll be able to afford the flashiest shell in the ocean, you know?
Not if I get there first. Think of all the tourists that treasure can bring to our city.
Well, don't you count out us bottom-siders. You'll be eating your hat when I get that treasure and fix up my restaurant.
It would appear the hunt is on, I say. The first stop on the map seems to be the forest to the north of here. May the best, Crab!
Apologies for the interruption, folks. I seem to have misheard something. I could have almost sworn there were some citizens here planning on unearthing some valuables. Need I remind you all how threatening the ocean is outside this reef? I'd hope it would go without saying that the duty of such a dangerous excavation would fall to the Shellfish Corporation. That would be safest for all involved. Don't you agree?
Yeah, we hear you, Roland. No problem.
Then, as Shellfish Corp's CEO and this fair city's de facto mayor, I suppose no one would have any objections to my taking sole control of this treasure hunt. Are we all in agreement?
Oh dear. I suppose that sounds all right with me, I say.
You hear what they're talking about over there?
Sounds like some kind of crazy treasure hunt.
Hey kid, I just got an idea. If you can go get that treasure they're jawing about, I'll gladly trade your shell for it.
For real? You'd really do that?
You bet. A prawn never goes back on his promise.
Aw, yeah! I'm gonna find that treasure!
Haha, yeah, you go, kid. Roland can't tell us what to do.
That treasure belongs to whoever can find it first!
The corporations don't control us!
I suppose a little friendly competition is only fair. I hope you know what you just dove into, kid. See you in the open ocean, treasure hunters.
And so we're introduced to our current primary antagonists, and given a Dark Souls-style Lord Soul objective in the form of the map fragments collectible in whatever order you wish. Each one will give you a hint as to the location of the next, but as I did on my playthrough, you can also just do them in the wrong order and obtain a clue that leads to the objective you've just completed. The prawn also opens up his shop to you as a place to exchange your claw items for microplastics, and as a general merchant selling various upgrade resources and consumables. The start of your main collection phase of the game will have you entering the fucking Sands Between. It's so stupid, I love this game. An area that locals warn you is home to a deadly threat which will gobble you up in one go. However, they've scented the main pathways which should keep the boss at bay while you make it to the next area of the game. Naturally, I planned on killing the boss first, which went about as well as expected. After failing a few times and realizing the run back was less than convenient, I decided to explore the sands in an effort to find a bonfire, which was located in a pretty central area of the sands. Now, I had previously insured a tennis ball shell with the rollout ability, which I found to be very valuable when tackling major enemies and anything else below boss level. However, a major point of failure for me on this fight was having a medium roll from the weight of the shell. Luckily, there's a soda can shell nearby the bonfire which has light rolls and offers a pretty convenient Ash of War that throws out a bunch of heat-seeking projectiles, which deal a small amount of damage but also keep the boss's balance bar from decreasing when in transitive moments between attacks. The light roll was particularly valuable on his mini-hit combo move, which has incredible tracking and requires avoiding 2 moves within the timing of a single dodge on the second and third hit. Of course, had I utilized shells with more efficiency and had I had access to the parry skill from the Moon Snail, this fight could have been made much more simple for me. But with what I had, I was forced to deal with the move in a consistent way, which for me meant light rolls and steeled nerves. His crushing slam move is also pretty interesting in that it has a lingering damage hitbox on the crab itself, so you're forced to dodge away enough to avoid it while close enough to get good damage in. He's also another boss that will utilize the Fear status effect in a roar move which can be somewhat mitigated by hiding in your shell, but also in his horrifying phase 2 move in which a bobbit worm will crawl out of his mouth to apply the fear to you. This might be a reference to the Guardian Ape in Sekiro, which also features a terror move where the boss screams, as well as a centipede emerging from its body. Either way, it's metal as fuck. One thing I wished I had invested in earlier was the resistance stat, which boosts shell durability as well as your resistance to status effects. Dark Souls has trained me to ignore these kinds of stats, which seems like a waste of points compared to straight damage. But the more I learned about the shell's effectiveness and engaging gameplay, the more I wished I had invested in it sooner. This also comes into play in most status effect dealing bosses, which in the case of Frighten is mitigated by being inside your shell but not avoided entirely, which can mean that even when doing your best to avoid the status, if the boss uses those moves consistently, you can take the effect despite your best efforts. And this is definitely not a criticism of the game, but it is certainly a case of me not utilizing the tools at my disposal to properly deal with threats. I didn't level a single point into resistance until much further into the game, just as I didn't have any umami skills activated at this point. While it made this fight much harder for me than it could have otherwise been, the challenge it presented and the option to fight this boss at this point left a big impression. Ravenous was certainly not my favorite fight in the game, but it was my most memorable for the experience that I had with it. The boss will drop hella umami crystals, which maybe I'll get around to spending, as well as what should be the second map fragment. This fight was kind of an eye-opener as to all that I was missing out on, and I shortly after found my way to the Moon Snail to upgrade my skills, many of which are very valuable. And then I went into town to slot the map fragment, only to be told to kill the Ravenous, remark that I just did that, and to be scolded by Conch for not following his directions. I went to Shellport to the next location, and the game crashed. This was the single crash I had in my playthrough, but still not great. Still nothing compared to Lords of the Fallen, but not great. I reloaded the game and entered the Grove, a mossy area that halts your progress with a diseased lycanthrope boss fight. Aside from the pun, this fight isn't anything special, especially considering you'll fight many lesser versions of this enemy later in the game. This one is special in that it can spawn crab adds by spitting them out, but that's about it that sets it apart. Its grab move will suck you in and eat your shell, which would lead you to believe that there would be some kind of mechanic where you throw something into his mouth when he sucks it to deal big damage. But as far as I'm aware, there's no mechanic in place. It's pretty basic, and I ended up using his suck move to time a charged attack shortly after it ended, turning its most powerful move into a huge opening. Moving on, the next area features some archer crabs shooting toothpicks at you, and they're just as annoying as they would seem. And there's a gum hammer crab, which will often serve as a major enemy and frequently beat my ass. There's also new umbrella toothpick crabs, which will use the umbrella as a shield. This area of the game really steps up the enemy design and increases the challenge dramatically. And after overcoming a very well designed level with many shortcuts to unlock, you'll come face to face with the Intimidation Crab. I mentioned it before, but a crab unsheathing a pair of chopsticks to use as a samurai sword is such a stupid, awesome concept. And the character design doesn't stop there, with antennae that resemble a samurai's helmet and this boss's fear move, in which he feigns a swing and turns his back to you. The face on his carapace is similar to a samurai's mask and inflicts fear before unleashing the real attack. This can be an interesting opportunity for you to learn the parry timing of this move. In Another Crab's Treasure, the parry timing is based on when you exit your shell, and when you're already shelled up to avoid the Frighten and a follow-up attack is coming, this can be the perfect chance to learn at least the timing of a single move so as to maintain the boss's balance bar, as well as to hit him with a riposte if you've unlocked that skill. His phase 2 is yet again another interesting character design moment, in which the boss rages and snaps his chopstick, with one breaking. This results in the boss transitioning to a dual weapon stance with one weapon larger than the other. This is an excellent way of visually telegraphing to the player how phase 2's moveset will work, being that his larger chopstick will have delayed attacks, whereas the smaller will swing immediately. The phase 2 will mostly consist of 2-hit combos, which is pretty basic but does well to fit the theme this boss was going for. And the terror move remains unchanged, so your parry practice will pay off throughout the fight. The arena is also thematically relevant in offering you sushi roll shells to use, which are surprisingly resilient, and through their munch ability offer a snack in the middle of the fight should you get hit. Defeating this boss will net you a stainless relic to upgrade your fork, some umami crystals, and the next map fragment. The next area is the Curdled Village, which has apparently hired Chris Kyle to run security around here. This sniper crab will push you to cover, which leads you through various encounters with smaller crabs as you attempt to ascend this hill. Your best line of action is to equip a heavy shell such as the coconut and eat the sniper shots by blocking as you make your way up. Behind the sniper, there's a shortcut leading back to the Intimidation Crab's boss room, but I didn't see that, so I frantically attempted to kill him before getting swarmed. There's also a gum hammer crab between you and him, so I definitely recommend getting the checkpoint first. The sniper doesn't respawn, so you can loot the curdled village much easier after disposing of him. The next segment of gameplay is rather unfortunate in terms of its level design, starting with this untextured rock, which would lead me to believe it shouldn't be walked upon. However, it is the right way to go. Then followed by these very vertical hooks which don't play well with the camera and require looking upward to trigger the grapple, and failing to do so will have you falling back down to the village below. Then there's a pretty bad point of loading, which will potentially have you walking off the cliff if you don't consciously stop yourself from moving while the game catches up. And finally, there's a series of jumps to make while ranged enemies fire shots at you, which isn't bad design, but it is challenging, and is on the tail end of a series of poorly designed set pieces which can compound your frustration should you fail here. This area could definitely use some TLC. Finally, you'll make it to the ultimate fight of this area. Chiton will meet you here and warn you of the dangerous foe ahead, calling him the Master. Upon entering the grove, you'll see the area has been littered with the shells of his victims, which can be used as a shell for yourself, the spell of which drops it as a decoy.
Why do you sad, polluted crabs keep coming to this place? I thought I made it clear. There's nothing for you here. Has your sense of self-preservation rotted away, even? Or perhaps you truly wish for death? Well, I'll gladly oblige you, my friend.
Grovekeeper Topoda is an exceptional spike of difficulty over anything prior, and honestly a lot of the endgame as well. His strikes are both delayed and quick, including a tail swipe that's difficult to see coming without a bit of practice, and he has an insane shell-melting mini hit combo. And if that wasn't bad enough, parrying any part of that combo results in a retaliation hit that cucks you out of riposting. Now this spike in difficulty left me a little bit out of sorts for a minute, and after reading the arena, seeing the decoy shells littered throughout the arena, I thought this might be more of a gimmick fight, requiring deploying a decoy and then wailing on the boss while he's distracted. And while I made some progress with this strategy, he certainly moves around too quick to damage him consistently, and I found myself running out of umami stars or shells to use. I think the decoy shells are an attempt to alleviate the learning curve for his ultimate Goku teleport punch, allowing you the option to subvert the move through setting up the decoy. I never ended up utilizing this strategy though, because I eventually focused on parrying and didn't want to be left shellless in a critical moment. The Goku punch is a bit awkward though, being that it's a shell smashing move which has to be dodged. You would expect it to interact with dodges in a streamlined way. However, the punch has some seriously strange interactions when hitting you within your iframes, such as pushing you through the map or throwing you into the sky. The move hyper tracks you and is guaranteed to at least collide with you even when you're dodging, resulting in you being thrown no matter if you successfully dodge or not. And that gives the vibe as though you're doing something wrong, even though it's intended to be that way. At very least, the move is pretty simple to dodge once you get the hang of it and stop letting your nerves get the best of you. You just time your dodge input to the moment he reappears after teleporting and you should be fine. The last thing I wanted to mention about Topoda is his strange lack of character design compared to other bosses. He's kinda just a mantis shrimp, which is fine because God already over-designed them, but also Topoda is an anti-junk character narratively, so it wouldn't make much sense to cover him in cool trash props. But he does stand out as being pretty plain in comparison. If I had to offer a theory as to why, I would say that the concept of this game was somewhat always hinging on the concept of a crab fighting a mantis shrimp. Mantis shrimps are already somewhat of a boss fight of a crustacean, and so it doesn't have to be anything more than that. I feel like this fight was designed very early in development, but that's just a theory. A crab theory.
Seems like I'm still out of practice. All skills fade with time, I suppose. I truly thought I would perish in a cooler way, though. Fighting at least 10 or 12 guys. Well, you've earned it, petite crab. Come and put my tortured soul to rest.
I'm not trying to kill you.
Oh.
After one of the best cutscenes in the game, Topoda will become an upgrade vendor, allowing you to spend your spare umami crystals on upgrading your augment abilities. As well as that, he offers you a new augment in the form of a Mantis Punch that's capable of breaking through the many purple cubes blocking your progress in areas of the game so far. Much like a collectathon game, it's time to backtrack to see what you can now collect, which is something that will happen several more times as you get more abilities that allow you to interact with the world in new ways. The final area you'll need to explore in order to obtain the final map piece is the Flotsam Vale, which branches off from the sands between and will eventually bring you to an encounter with Inkerton. And I say encounter because you'll only have to take off a quarter of his health before he flees, telling you you're not worth his time. This does have value, however, in offering you a sneak peek at his basic melee moves, which will be helpful to you when you fight him for real. Continuing further into the Vale, and you'll see that it's essentially the poison swamp of this game. The enemies within include the lesser versions of the diseased lycanthrope and new ranged pistol shrimp. And within the second area, you can find the enemy variant of the Royal Shell Splitter, which will drop the Sharktooth Plus. There's also a fight called the Scuttling Sludge Steamroller, which is an upgraded variant of the Pathfinder crab we fought inside the Moonsnail's cave. I like that both of those fights have alliterations for names, and I really like the Roman helmet mohawk he has, made out of a broom. This fight, as his name would imply, features a steamroll attack with his paint roller, which paves the way in gunk. But other than that, there isn't much of a difference from the Pathfinder. At the far end of the swamp, you'll find a vent which will take you to an enclosed portion of the Flotsam Vale, which uniquely features sections of open-air gameplay. This path ends with a fight with the Ceviche Sisters, a pair of pistol shrimp notable for being one of the few gank fights in the whole game, and the others only have crab ads. And I'm gonna be honest, I didn't really feel like investing that much time into a gank fight with ranged enemies, so I pretty much just cheesed them with a combination of abilities. The melee attack upgrade of the fishing line did some serious damage and closed the distance between me and the boss I was targeting, followed by massively buffed charge attacks which finished the first sister in a handful of hits. One thing I like to see in challenging games is the option to massively overpower your enemy in the case that you're not enjoying the challenge at hand. A fight like Gideon in Elden Ring can be an absolute buzzkill, especially in challenge runs, and unfortunately it takes great efforts to one-shot him. Another Crab's Treasure is rich with powerful options if you care to use them. However, the ultimate of which is to go into the assist menu and activate gun mode. This accessibility option gives Krill a fucking 9 to blast all the ops with, which is a bold choice, especially in the Souls crowd. A lot of people won't be able to stomach that an option like this is in the game, even to the point that it doesn't even block achievements. Personally, I say, get over it. The game is pretty fun and challenging, and I respect the fuck out of the devs for having the balls to go all in on accessibility, especially considering this game might be played by a younger audience who could use the help. Speaking of guns, the Shrimps dropped the Bubble Bullet adaptation, which is pretty underwhelming. I believe you can use it to trigger the capsize of enemies, Bloodborne style, although I never found it to be all that useful. This was the adaptation I used the least. Wait, no, there's a Bobbit worm trap that I didn't use once. It might be good, but I don't know. Now that we've cleared the Shrimps, we can obtain the final piece of the map and return to the city to slot it. However, our celebrations are cut short when Roland takes the map from us and begins his plans to uncover the treasure. Long story short, we need a boat to sail through the slurry off of Flotsam Vale, and Roland already has one. Luckily, our friends come together and get a boat, but we need a source of power to get it moving. And so the plan is to scour Roland's facility in search of a battery. And I hate to say this, but the next extended section of gameplay is pretty grueling. You're given new mechanics to solve these factory puzzles with the ultimate goal of continuing the electrical charge down this wire by connecting fuses at the various intersections. The first is the fuses themselves, which acts as a shell until you slot them and can be broken by enemy attacks. The next is a magnet puzzle of using a spring shell to block when in view of the magnet, which will then transport you to a new area. And so you end up solving the fuse puzzle around 5 times while traversing these buildings, and there really isn't much more to it than that. It took me like 2 hours to find all the important items while clearing these sections, and the gameplay was undeniably repetitive. in a pretty uninspired setting. This is certainly unfortunate, especially considering the pace that the game had been going at and the incredible art direction we've seen previously to spend so much time here. The boss here is also pretty unfortunate. After chatting with Firth about workers' rights, you'll plunge yourself down this pipe in an effort to find the source of the facility's power.
The world these days is dark and mean. Even the water tastes unclean. And even those you love and trust would rip your limbs off if they must. Like Mr. R, the one in charge, who scrapped our homes to build his barge. But don't be gloomy, glum, or sad, 'cause down in here, it's not so bad. Save crying for another day. Forget it all. Come on, let's play!
The fight with Voltai feels like it was ripped directly out of Banjo-Kazooie, lacking a real moveset and instead opting for 4 different minigame attack modes, and featuring bits of platforming thrown in. And I wouldn't necessarily say it's bad, it's just not what Souls players are really looking for. If the whole game was like this and it was marketed towards a younger audience, then I imagine a fight like this would be a lot easier to stomach. And if anything, this fight just kinda highlights how well designed the rest of the conventional Souls style fights have been so far. The stark contrast between freeform battles to the death and this scripted set piece is jarring. And the funny thing is that this fight could honestly be one of the best fights in all of Banjo-Kazooie or Yooka-Laylee if it was included in them, whereas it's one of the worst fights in Crab Souls. Ironically, this fight is one of the few where you can take advantage of jumps to avoid damage, which I would contribute to its platformer style of design, and that doesn't make up for the lack of real combat within this fight. The arena fills with poison at one point, you do more damage minigames, and then you beat it, which grants you an adaptation that summons an electric eel which can interact with these crab conductor things. It turns out the battery was inside you all along. And so you return to your friends, power the boat, and set off to beat Roland to the punch. While sailing, all of your friends begin talking about what they want to do once they get the treasure, eventually all agreeing to split the prize evenly between them. Then they gaslight the fuck out of you when you say you need it all to get your shell back. Oh, sorry I've been doing everything while you useless dicks tag along this whole time. Like, last time I checked, none of you jumped in to help me fight Pagarus the Ravenous, you assholes. Anyway, you eventually reach Roland's barge to confront him.
Well, that wasn't as bad as I thought. No one even showed up to stop us.
I don't like it. Something smells about all this. Roland knew we were gonna show up, so where's all the resistance? It all really stinks of...
A trap? Right you are, bottom feeder. See, us civilized folk have rules. As much as I dislike your little mottled crew, it wouldn't be gentlemanlike to have you disposed of without a good reason. But all y'all have just stepped onto my private property without permission. And where I come from, that's a crime called trespassing. I presume you know what we do to trespassers at Shellfish Corp. Inkerton, kill the city folk.
Gladly.
And as for you...
Yo, did this dude just invoke the castle doctrine in order to kill us? That's kinda wild. Roland's fight, taking place in a pinball machine with him being a roly-poly bug, is again a pretty cool use of character design and theme. And like with the sushi rolls in the Intimidation Crabs arena, this fight offers you gotcha capsule shells to pinball your way through the fight. Roland's moveset requires a careful eye to understand the subtleties between each move and the various timings between them, being that they're mostly pretty similar. And that's not to mention that some will continue attacking even after being parried, and will have to be identified before you jump the gun and end up eating a shot while attacking. Despite being a pretty disturbingly cruel businessman, Roland is presented with a good bit of slapstick within his fight, at several points falling on his ass and being unable to get up. This includes when being capsized and after missing his roly-poly pinball special. His grab move is unique in offering a more interesting interaction action when dodged than when it's not, in which Roland winds up his grab while an audience gasps, only for him to miss and say, "Oh shit," one of the few instances of a swear word in the whole game, which catches you off guard when the setting has you expecting the use of a C-based pun instead. The whole game they've used cutesy phrases like "what the shell," and out of the blue they drop a shit right in the middle of a boss fight when Roland misses a shot. Yeah, that one got me, that's pretty funny.
Remarkable work, vagabond. The barge is ours. All that remains is to...
What the shell was that?
Stupid little bottom feeders. Don't let any of these trespassers leave, boys.
Oh, son.
Y'all just don't know when to quit, do you? You could have all stayed in your cozy little homes in the reef, watched a shellfish corp dug up this treasure, and waited for that newfound wealth to benefit everyone in town. But y'all just had to get greedy. You decided you deserved this treasure more than the fine people of New Carcinia. And I would be remiss as a local business leader if I didn't punish y'all for this little indiscretion. I dare say that not a single one of y'all...
Shut up! I've been working my butt off trying to get my old life back! I'm pretty sure I've been working harder than anyone else! And now all of a sudden, I'm the jerk for wanting the treasure I earned? And you don't have to do anything at all! You just sit around and stuff just happens for you! It's not fair! It's all a bunch of bullshit! I'm sick of it! I'm gonna get that
Krill, wait!
treasure!
Hold on to something, y'all!
So Krill, despite being totally right about having to do everything this whole time while everyone benefits from his actions, throws a fit, and accidentally causes the barge and everyone on it to fall into the abyss. He passes out and has a dream represented by this watercolor-style slideshow showing that, despite fighting to get his old life back, his old life wasn't all that valuable. It was just comfortable. He liked being alone because it was better than being afraid. And as he grows into his shell, it becomes the only thing that he knows. When Krill wakes, he enters the video game protagonist at their lowest mode, in which he's unable to sprint or attack, and at the same time he's being haunted by a spectral voice pontificating about pessimism. This kind of gameplay section is pretty important for a game trying to focus on storytelling and developing atmosphere, but it certainly hurts the replayability. Eventually you'll meet up with Firth.
It's over. It's all over. But like, for real this time.
Do you know what happened?
Oh, now you care about the others, is that right? They can get boiled for all I care, and as a matter of fact, so can you. Take a look, pal. Here's the treasure you had us throw our lives away for.
What's that?
It's nothing! No plastic, no glass, not even a single nugget of foam. Just this pile of damp paper.
It was really all for... so...
You want my advice? Go find whatever the apex predator is down here, and jump in their goddamn mouth! Then you'll finally be valuable to someone!
After hearing all that, you're left with no will left to fight, and upon encountering the isopods in the next area, you're swarmed and beaten down. Nema saves you, and to cut to the chase, gives you just enough of a pep talk to get you moving. but also kinda guilt trips you into helping them all escape the depths because you're the only useful one down there. Upon meeting with Conch next, he'll reveal to you that an even more valuable treasure could be down there, which then motivates you once again. You traverse the Unfathom by lighting fallen glow sticks and using the light bulb shells, while avoiding various deep-sea predators that act as more powerful versions of the enemies we've seen so far, before reaching the barge and speaking to Conch once more. He tells you of a place called the Old Ocean and says the treasure might be located there before Krill notices an umami current in the distance which he can use to get home. After making your way over to it, you might find it strange that the current didn't need to be activated. The shell was already here and ready to use. Petroch the False Moon is a pretty simple boss fight with some basic AoE patterns on his summonable umami crystal blasts. Its moves are telegraphed in a way that makes parrying intuitive and rewarding, and this was a welcomed sight after another pretty long stretch of bossless gameplay, especially after the story-heavy walking section. Petroch can also block with its shell, which can deal damage to you if you attack it with a charged attack, and uses a rolling animation similar to Roland's. After beating the False Moon, Conch will meet up with you and will spill the beans as to the treasure he's looking for, which is a magical shell infused with umami which can control the currents. Essentially the Fish Infinity Gauntlet. And after finishing your conversation, you're given the reward for beating the False Moon, the adaptation Snail Sanctum, which allows you to summon a shell on command. Now at this point I had basically done a 180 on the shells from where I had started, in that I had avoided using them for a good chunk of the game. However, now they're one of my favorite aspects of the game in both gameplay as well as the overall vibe of being a resourceful hermit crab, utilizing various pieces of trash as shells. This adaptation quickly became my favorite, and I returned to Totopa to max it out as quickly as I could. The upgraded version increases its stats and adds a shell spell that throws a pretty useful projectile. Now that you've been convinced to proceed even further into the depths, you'll eventually come across these spider crab enemies that look like something out of a sci-fi movie. For some reason they shoot explosives and have an incredibly atmospheric phone ringing that plays before each shot. Bringing one down will grant you some umami crystals, however they don't die permanently, which I found surprising. And even more surprising when the next area had like 6 of the fuckers walking around. Eventually you'll reach the point that triggers this cutscene.
And you're certain we're going the right way?
How should I know? Think I spend my weekends here, do you?
Well then, what the shuck am I still paying you for? Matter of fact, we're in this mess cause you couldn't defeat a damn lobster. Good for nothing. I should have left you on the seabed where I found you, you little...
It's you. Enjoying the spoils, are you, lad? Proud of what you've done?
Look, man, I don't want anything from you. Please just leave me alone. I don't want to fight anymore.
Please leave me alone. I don't want to fight anymore.
But fight ye did. Just like me. Just like old Lincoln. And down here we've both drifted. 2 worthless sinners. Right where we belong. The bottom of the drain!
I think it's a neat detail that Inkerton's subtitles changed the font that represents gunk infection just before he attacks you. It kinda implies that he wouldn't have killed Roland or attacked you without the gunk's influence. Anyway, his fight is honestly kinda awkward and underwhelming. After building him up throughout the whole game as this badass bloodborne squid, I expected this fight to be much harder and more complex. It's certainly not bad, but having him float through the air and dance around makes it a little difficult to read his telegraphs. And on top of that, the momentum of this fight is constantly snuffed out by his ink attack forcing you to disengage. And I get that he's a squid and you pretty much had to give him an ink attack of some kind. I just wish it was more of a passive thing. Like he could have squirted a small amount of ink every time you hit him, representing a cartoonish blood splatter or something. Other than those small issues, the fight is pretty fun and interesting, and I said it before, but his character design is incredible. But again, this might be working against him. When you tell me there's a bloodborne squid, I'm going to expect a lot from this fight. After beating Inkerton, you find a mystical hermit crab elevator that you and Conch can use to descend into the Old Ocean. It turns out that the Old Ocean is a forest of bleached coral, which is pretty heavy imagery for a game about a cartoon crab. Using real-world ecological disasters as a setting for this Farah Missoula-style dead world is a bold and disturbing choice, and I'm here for it. The first enemies you'll encounter here are bleached crabs, which, once defeated, will molt into a second life. However, will unfortunately still have the same amount of health as before. They're dangerous and pretty creepy, using a similar sound effect to the regenerator enemies from Resident Evil 4. Eventually you'll make your way to the Bleached City, which is filled with platforming sections and gauntlets of enemies, which will culminate in making your way to the throne room. Sitting on the throne is a giant bleached crab with a toilet wand scepter. His arena is filled with teeth traps, which will snap shut on your tail, breaking any shell you have and preventing you from re-equipping one should you trigger them. I find it best to roll over all of them before you start the fight in order to clear the arena. Once engaged with, the Bleached King will attack with sweeping and slamming toilet brush attacks, a leg slam, and a radiating ground pound which can be jumped over or dodged through. Either way, the timing is tricky, and I wouldn't say that jumping is any more effective, and so once again you might as well just dodge. And that's kind of a shame. I really thought this game would take more advantage of its platforming aspects to offer more engagement in boss fights through jump attacks. After beating the king, he dies and expectedly resurrects, molting from his shell and becoming, however you pronounce his name, Reborn. He retains the ability to utilize a radiating ground pound by hurling himself into the air and slamming down, which is still pretty tricky to avoid consistently. On top of that, he does a lot of flailing spin moves that don't telegraph the moment of impact all that well, which makes parrying a difficult and frustrating experience. This boss overall seems pretty sloppy, and I wish I would have known that and returned the sloppiness with sloppiness of my own by abusing hook moves and adaptations. With the king dethroned, you now have access to that throne, which it turns out was a shitter all along. And naturally, your first instinct is to flush yourself, which luckily enough leads you directly to the treasure you were looking for.
By God! This is it! This is it, Krill! They all told me it was just a legend! Those buffoons! The perfect whirl! Do you know what this means, child? The archaeological community will never be the same, I say! With the proper funding, perhaps we can begin to learn the secrets of the ancient hermits. And then it's only a matter of time before... Oh, God damn it!
Drivel. Titan! Oh my God! He's dead! You killed him!
Time, he says. The old idiot. Time is something we have none of. We're already much too late. Tides upon tides upon tides too late. This ocean was eaten up before I was even an egg.
What? Why did you do that? He didn't do anything wrong!
We are beyond saving. Soon we'll share the same fate as the old ocean. The world has only one use now. To punish this ugly world, to rip it asunder. You think you can wield it? In your complacent claws, it's no better than a rock. And you're no better than them. No better than the ones who ate this world up. To think, we really thought you could be our shell. I could vomit.
You're not Titan.
How can you stand it? How can you sleep? How can you even breathe? You've seen how this ocean's been maimed. The agony it's in. The future that was stolen from us. You've seen everything we wanted you to see. So where's your anger? Where is your rage? Doesn't this pain boil you inside, little crab? Doesn't it just make you want to fucking scream?
So Chitin is infected with the worm from Attack on Titan, and becomes a tool for Preya Dubia, the Ocean's Agony. Now, I first thought this fight to be the final fight of the game, which made sense to me at the time. It's a fight with the last possible thing standing in my way, preventing me from obtaining the Infinity Shell. And I was so disheartened to know that the final fight was essentially the same setup as the final fight in Lords of the Fallen. A bunch of glowing ads to kill while dodging projectiles. Yeah, it's pretty bad. I mean, that being said, after this you at least get some combat with Chiton as a DPS phase, so the fucking fish game is still leagues ahead of Lords of the bitch-ass Fallen. But that piece of shit doesn't excuse a bad boss in this game. Each ad-killing phase increases the amount of crabs in subsequent ones, with the second one including a giant disembodied crab claw, and so you'll want to cram in as much DPS as possible each chance you get. In my final attempt, I managed to get a full kill in 1 DPS before triggering Phase 2. Phase 2 is as bad as it is simple. All you have to do is dodge attacks and wait for the thing to kill itself. At least I think that's what's happening. Every so often the boss just takes damage and you kind of just wait it out. Yeah, this fight really sucks, but luckily it isn't the final fight, thank God.
Chiton! Are you okay?
I killed him. The old man who never raised a claw against me. I was the strong, wielding death against the weak. There is no salvation for me now.
It wasn't you, Chiton. It was whatever that thing was, making you evil.
A great confluence of damned souls. A grim slurry of umami. My body moved at its whim, true. But the anger was mine. The hate was mine. Without it, it could not have taken me as a shell.
Stop talking! You're going to be okay, alright?
Perform me a favor, vagabond. My anger was too much for me, but do not let it vanish. If you can, take my anger with you, and wield it where it is needed, to protect this world.
Stop it! Stop talking like you're going to die! I didn't even like you guys when I met you, but I don't want you to go! I don't want to be alone again!
The confluence was wrong. There's still time to save this ocean. I must believe this. Even if it is a lie, I will believe it. Until the day this all ends.
Oh, wait! That old guy was saying that shell has a lot of magic in it, right? I'll just put it on. Maybe I can heal you.
Krill.
Just stay right there. I'll be right back.
Whoa! What happened? I put on this cool-looking shell, and for some reason I feel super great now. Like I could take on the whole ocean. Kinda like anything I want can become reality, you know? This is gonna change everything. I'm gonna be a hero.
Blue... Firth! I need that shell to save Chiton. Can I put it on for a second?
Chiton? Who's that? Whatever you need, it can wait, pal. I'm thinking big right now, and my big things are gonna save New Carcinia. Yeah, that's a great idea. Great thinking, me. Let's do it.
Oh, no. Just stay right there, Chiton. I'll be right back.
Hey there, pal. No hard feelings about our little disagreement earlier, right? My new powers are crazy. I just moved this whole island directly over New Carcinia. Looks like Trash Day came early. Pretty cool, right?
Firth, I really need that shell. Chiton's hurt bad.
I'll tell you who's hurt bad. The economy. That's who. With Roland gone and Scuttleport out of commission, our whole city's gonna completely collapse. And not only that, folks are starting to say the trash we've been using is physically harmful to us. Who would have thought? But it's all gonna be okay. Now that I'm the god of this ocean, I've got a super genius 3-step plan to save everyone. Step 1. Sink Trash Island onto New Carcinia, eliminating the whole concept of Trash Day. A permanent economic boom! What's better than that?
You're going to cover the city in trash? Can we just talk about this? I just need to borrow the world for a minute!
Step 2. Use that trash to usher New Carcinia into a second golden age. You'll see technology advance beyond your wildest dreams!
You're not listening to me!
And step 3. With all that new tech, we'll form a plan to make New Carcinia's economy more sustainable. We ought to be able to start using 20% less trash within the next 200 tides or so. You thought I forgot about that part, didn't you? But I'm a caring guy.
If you dump more trash on the reef, aren't they just gonna get gonked faster? And I still need to save Chitin! So give me that shell! I'm not going to let you do this!
That's the cool part about being a god. I don't need you to let me do anything. It's just gonna happen.
I need that shell! I'll fight you for it!
Huh, that's a bummer. I thought you had a good head on your shoulders, pal. I was really starting to respect you. But here you are, resorting to physical violence to take down an honest business crab. No need to get angered, pal. You're only gonna get yourself hurt.
I'm not! I am getting angry, aren't I? I think maybe I've been angry the whole time. Ever since I left the tide pool. I never wanted to be. Everyone else seems angry all the time. I didn't want to be like that. But I can't help it. Not when people like you always get everything you want, and other people get hurt for it. It's not fair! And I'm really strong now. Strong enough to stop you from making things worse!
You really are quite whiny, you know? If you're gonna fight me, quit the sob story and just do it. I've got an empire to build here. Come on, do it! Hit me! Don't be a coward!
Final fight with Firth is very similar to a PvP fight in that Firth essentially fights with your moveset, including charge attacks and adaptations. I find that it's best to shell up whenever you're waiting for him to attack, as his basic move, which leads into a combo, can swing very fast and catch you off guard. In the case of that combo, you can make space and then charge an attack as he's finishing the final hit to deal some free damage. The rest of his moves I generally attempt to parry and riposte on until he activates his trash sword, which can be safely damaged on and after. In his phase 2, he becomes the Avatar of Waste, sprouting spectral tentacles, which simplifies his moveset into a 2-hit combo, a single hit, and some special moves, including a Sea Urchin Throw, a move that spawns a whirlpool, and a grab ending with a pretty sizable opening. Overall, this fight is pretty good and acts as a cool mirror fight with an enemy that didn't earn their power.
No, Krill, wait! Don't put that on!
I think I get what Chitin meant now!
Krill, hold on! Let's talk about this like adults!
If I'm gonna be angry, I might as well use it for something good! So that maybe, one day, other people won't have to fight like me! And what better way to start than to beat up a selfish, greedy, muscle shocker like... Yeah!
Wait!
After the battle, you're left to speak to the surviving citizens of New Carcinia, including Firth.
Hey, pal. No hard feelings, sir.
And Nema, who asks you what you're going to do next. Krill doesn't really have an answer for that, except that he's going to get his shell back. He approaches Pronathin, asks for his shell, and when Pronathin says no, you're only left with one option.
What word comes to mind when you think of the Earth? This world is resilient, but not endlessly so. As this Earth spins ever faster towards its uncertain future, all will face that future in their own way. Some will fight for the world they dream of, blade in hand. Some will spend their whole lives saving others from falling through the cracks. And others still will never rest in one place for long. As this fragile world begins to fracture, no matter how large or small, the one thing no creature can afford is complacency. But though history talks of warriors and heroes, and great mighty crabs that shook the world, it is the thankless deeds that shall ever make that world worth fighting for.
This game was absolutely charming in every aspect of its design. The indie devs poured so much of themselves into this game, and it clearly shows in the final project. It was surprisingly funny, dark at times, and showed immense respect to the games that inspired it, as well as an understanding of what made those games great. Is it perfect? Of course not. At times its design was really sloppy and the gameplay was frustrating. However, the overall charming nature of its design made those flaws easy to overlook. While playing, I kept the idea in my head as to how much I would feel comfortable paying for this game, which is free on Games Pass. And ultimately, I came to the conclusion that I would easily feel comfortable paying $40 for the experience. Afterwards, I looked into the actual retail price, which was $30, and it was on sale on Steam for $27. Ultimately, Another Crab's Treasure's weakest point comes down to its lack of replayability. There is no New Game Plus, and with somewhat simplistic bosses, I don't really feel the need to play it again, especially when considering the more grueling, slow sections. Even so, I think $30 is a more than fair price for the game as it is, and if you already have Games Pass, I couldn't recommend it enough. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Catch you next time.